I'm Maya Chen, 29 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've lived in the shadow of my older sister Victoria. Everyone calls her Tori. She's the golden child, the one who did everything right, climbed every ladder, impressed every person who mattered. Corporate marketing executive, six-figure salary, designer wardrobe, the kind of life that looks perfect on social media. And me? I'm a freelance graphic designer and children's book illustrator working out of a cramped studio apartment in Portland's Pearl District. My income fluctuates wildly from month to month. My workspace is cluttered with sketch pads, half-empty coffee mugs, and rejected design concepts. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. According to my family, especially Tori, my career is pathetic. A hobby at best. A failure at worst. She never missed an opportunity to remind me of that, her voice dripping with condescension every time we were in the same room. For years I absorbed her criticism, swallowed my hurt and kept working, hoping that one day my parents would see value in what I created. But that day never came. Instead, I watched Tori collect praise like trophies while I remained invisible. Then everything changed when her new boss discovered a secret, one that shattered the perfect image she'd spent years constructing. A secret that involved me. If you were in my position, would you have stayed silent, or would you have let the truth come out? Tell me in the comments what you would do. Growing up in suburban Portland, our house was a shrine to Tori's accomplishments. Her academic awards lined the hallway walls in expensive frames. Her graduation photos from University of Washington, both undergrad and MBA, sat prominently on the mantel. My mother, Linda Chen, would give tours to visiting relatives, pointing out each milestone with swelling pride. My father, Robert Chen, a retired accountant who valued stability and prestige above all else, would nod along, adding commentary about Tori's salary increases and promotions. I remember being 12 years old, showing my parents a watercolor painting I'd spent weeks perfecting for a school art competition. It depicted our neighborhood park in autumn, every leaf carefully shaded, every shadow precisely placed. I'd won second place and I was so proud. I rushed home with the ribbon pinned to my shirt, bursting through the door, calling for my parents. My mother was on the phone. She glanced at me, smiled briefly, then returned to her conversation. My father was reading the newspaper. He looked up, said something like "Good job, sweetheart," then went back to the sports section. Later that evening, Tori came home from high school with news that she'd been accepted into the Advanced Placement Economics course. The dinner table exploded with excitement. My mother cooked her favorite meal. My father opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving. My painting and its second-place ribbon sat forgotten on the kitchen counter, buried under junk mail by the next morning. That was the pattern. Tori achieved and the family celebrated. I created, and the family acknowledged it with distracted nods before moving on to more important things. By the time I graduated high school, I'd learned to expect nothing. I went to Portland State University for graphic design, a choice my father called impractical and my mother called concerning. Tori, already working her way up the corporate ladder at a Seattle marketing firm, told me I was setting myself up for disappointment. After graduation, I started freelancing. It was tough, inconsistent, often frustrating. Some months I'd land a great client and make $4,000. Other months, I'd scrape together $2,000 from small logo designs and social media graphics for local businesses. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, barely 500 square feet, with a Murphy bed that folded into the wall and a desk crammed near the only window. My workspace was chaos, but it was mine. I illustrated children's books on commission, my favorite kind of work. There was something pure about creating images that would spark joy in young readers, about bringing stories to life with color and imagination. But my family saw it differently. At family dinners, which happened every other Sunday at my parents' house, the conversation always turned to careers. Tori would dominate, talking about her latest campaign, the difficult client she'd won over, the promotion she was angling for. My parents would lean in, asking questions, offering advice, celebrating her wins. When the conversation occasionally drifted to me, it was perfunctory. "How's the art thing going, Maya?" my father would ask, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's graphic design and illustration," I'd correct gently. "It's going well. I just finished a project for a children's book publisher." That's nice, my mother would say, already turning back to Tori. Then Tori would jump in with something cutting. Must be nice to work in your pajamas, she'd say with a smirk. No office politics, no real deadlines, no pressure. Just doodling whenever inspiration strikes. Her tone made it clear what she thought. That I wasn't really working. That my career was a joke. My parents would laugh awkwardly, not quite defending me but not quite agreeing either. I'd force a smile, push food around my plate, and count the minutes until I could leave. Marcus Rivera, my best friend since middle school, was the only person who truly understood. Marcus taught 7th grade English at a public school in Northeast Portland. He was passionate about his work, underpaid, and completely unimpressed by corporate ladder climbing. We'd meet at a coffee shop called Grind and Brew near his school, a cozy place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Over lattes, I'd vent about my family. Marcus would listen, his dark eyes sympathetic, occasionally interjecting with blunt observations. Your sister is threatened by you, he said once, stirring sugar into his coffee. She knows you're talented. That's why she tears you down. I shook my head. She's not threatened. She's successful. She makes more in a month than I make in half a year. Success isn't just money, Maya. You create things that matter. She pushes products. There's a difference. I wanted to believe him, but it was hard when my own parents seemed to agree with Tori's assessment of my life. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening in late March. My parents had invited both Tori and me to dinner. Tori arrived late, as usual, sweeping in with her fiancé Derek Ashford, an investment banker with slicked back hair and an expensive watch. She was glowing, practically vibrating with excitement. She waited until we were all seated, plates filled with my mother's pot roast, before making her announcement. I got promoted, she said, her voice bright. Senior Marketing Director at Apex Strategies. The room erupted. My mother actually squealed, jumping up to hug Tori. My father stood, shaking Derek's hand as if he'd had something to do with it, then embracing Tori with rare emotion. They toasted with wine, peppering her with questions about her new salary, her new responsibilities, her corner office. I sat there, fork in hand, watching the celebration unfold. I was happy for her, genuinely, but there was a hollow ache in my chest, a familiar feeling of being outside looking in. Finally, my mother turned to me, almost as an afterthought. And how are things with you, Maya? Any big projects? I opened my mouth to mention the children's book series I'd just been commissioned for. A 3-book deal that would keep me busy for the next year and pay $15,000 total. It was the biggest contract I'd ever landed. Before I could speak, Tori cut in. Oh, Maya's still doing her little drawings, she said, waving her hand dismissively. It's cute, really. A nice hobby. It's not a hobby, I said quietly. It's my career. Tori laughed, a sharp sound. Career? Maya, you make what, $2,000 a month? That's barely survival. That's not a career. That's a side hustle. My father shifted uncomfortably. Tori's not wrong, Maya. You're 29. Don't you think it's time to consider something more stable? My mother nodded. We worry about you, honey. What happens when you're older? You don't have benefits, no retirement plan, no job security. I felt heat rising in my face. I'm doing what I love. Isn't that worth something? Tori leaned back, crossing her arms. Doing what you love doesn't pay the bills. You're living in a tiny apartment, driving a car that's falling apart, struggling every month. Meanwhile, I just bought a condo downtown. Maybe it's time to grow up. The words landed like a slap. Derek smirked into his wine glass. My parents said nothing, their silence in agreement. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need to go. Maya, don't be dramatic, my mother said. We're just being honest. Honest, I repeated, grabbing my purse. Right. I left without another word, driving back to my apartment with tears blurring my vision. I sat in my car outside my building for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, replaying Tori's. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Words. Pathetic. Hobby. Grow up. The next morning Marcus called. He'd heard about the dinner from a mutual friend whose mother knew my mother. Small town dynamics even in a city. You okay, he asked. Not really. She's awful, Maya. You know that, right? I know. But maybe she's not wrong. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Don't do that. Don't let her make you doubt yourself. But I was doubting. For the first time in years, I wondered if I'd made a mistake choosing this path. If my parents were right. If Tori was right. Then 2 weeks later, everything shifted. Tori called me on a Thursday afternoon. Her voice unusually tight. We need to talk. About what? Just meet me. Tomorrow. Grind and brew. 1 o'clock. She hung up before I could respond. I spent the next 24 hours anxious, unsure what she wanted. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Tori was already there, sitting at a corner table, her expression unreadable. She looked polished as always, navy blazer, hair perfectly styled, but there was tension in her shoulders. I sat down across from her. What's going on? She didn't waste time. My new boss at Apex, Jonathan Pierce. He's been digging into the team's past projects. Doing some kind of audit. Okay, I said slowly, unsure where this was going. He found something. My stomach dropped. What did he find? She looked away, jaw tight. The campaign. The one that got me promoted at my last job. The Riverside Hotel rebrand. I remembered it. 5 years ago, Tori had been working at a mid-sized marketing firm in Seattle. She'd led a campaign for a boutique hotel chain that had been struggling. The rebrand was a massive success, catapulting the hotels into profitability and earning Tori a promotion and a significant raise. It had been the launching pad for her entire career. What about it? I asked. He found the original design files. Tori, what are you talking about? She finally met my eyes, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. The designs, Maya. The logos, the color schemes, the entire visual identity. They had your signature embedded in the metadata. My heart stopped. 5 years ago, Tori had come to me in a panic. She'd been assigned the Riverside project but was drowning. Her team was behind schedule, the client was furious, and she was on the verge of being fired. She begged me to help just this once. Please, Maya. I'll pay you. I just need something to show them. I can't lose this job. I'd spent 3 weeks working around the clock, creating a complete visual identity for the hotel chain. Logos, color palettes, marketing materials, website mockups. I'd poured everything I had into it, believing I was helping my sister in a moment of crisis. When I finished, I sent her the files. She'd paid me $2,000, called it a freelance gig, and promised to credit me as a contractor. But she never did. When the campaign launched, Tori's name was on everything. She'd presented it as her own work. When I confronted her, she brushed it off. It was a team effort, Maya. These things are collaborative. You got paid. What's the problem? I'd let it go, telling myself it didn't matter, that helping family was more important than credit. But it had mattered. That campaign had built Tori's reputation. It had opened doors, led to promotions, ultimately brought her to Apex Strategies. And I'd received $2,000 and a pat on the head. Now, sitting across from her in the coffee shop, the weight of it crashed over me. He knows I didn't create it, Tori said, her voice barely above a whisper. He knows you did. And he's furious. I stared at her, 1,000 emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Part of me just felt tired. What does he want? He wants to meet you. He wants to hear your side. Tori leaned forward, desperation creeping into her voice. Maya, please. If this gets out, my career is over. I'll be blacklisted. I could lose everything. I thought about all the Sunday dinners, all the dismissive comments, all the years of being told my work didn't matter. You took credit for my work, I said quietly. For 5 years, you let people believe you created something I made. You built your entire career on it. It was one project, Maya. One project that changed everything for you. And you never told anyone the truth. She reached across the table, grabbing my hand. I'll make it right. I'll tell Jonathan it was a misunderstanding. I'll say we collaborated. Just please don't let him ruin me. I pulled my hand back, standing up. I need to think. Maya, please. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Tori sitting there, panic etched across her face. For the first time in my life, I held the power. The secret was out, and the choice of what to do with it was mine. I spent the entire night staring at my ceiling, replaying Tori's words in the coffee shop. Her desperation had been real, raw in a way I'd never seen from her before. The polished veneer she always wore had cracked, revealing something vulnerable underneath. But that vulnerability didn't erase the years of dismissal, the casual cruelty, the way she built her empire on my work while calling my career pathetic. Sleep didn't come. Instead, I lay there thinking about that project 5 years ago, remembering details I tried to forget. It had been late August when Tori first called me about Riverside Hotel. I was living in an even smaller apartment back then. A studio in southeast Portland that smelt perpetually of the Thai restaurant downstairs. I'd been struggling more than usual that month, having lost a regular client to budget cuts. My bank account hovered dangerously close to empty, and rent was due in a week. When my phone rang and Tori's name flashed across the screen, I'd answered with cautious hope. We didn't talk often unless family dinners forced us together. "Maya, I need your help," she'd said without preamble. Her voice had been tight with stress, so different from her usual confident tone. "I'm working on this huge campaign at the firm, and everything is falling apart. The client hates what we've shown them so far. My creative director is breathing down my neck. I could lose my job over this." "What kind of campaign?" I'd asked, sitting up straighter on my futon. "A boutique hotel chain called Riverside. They're rebranding their entire identity. New logo, new color scheme, new marketing materials, everything. We're 3 weeks from the pitch deadline and what we have is garbage. The client already threatened to pull the contract." I'd felt a spark of interest despite my caution. Hotel branding was exactly the kind of work I loved, visual identity that told a story, that created an atmosphere before guests even walked through the door. "What do you need from me?" "Everything," she'd admitted. "Maya, I know we don't always see eye to eye, but you're talented. You have this eye for design that I don't have. I need you to create the visual identity for this chain. Logo, color palette, marketing mockups, website design concepts. The whole package." "Tori, that's weeks of work. I have other projects and I'm already behind on rent." "I'll pay you," she'd said quickly. $5,000. And I'll credit you as a contractor on the project. This could be good exposure for you. The client is connected. If they like your work, it could lead to more opportunities." $5,000. At the time, it had felt like a lifeline. It would cover rent for months, give me breathing room to focus on building my portfolio. And the promise of credit, of having my name attached to a successful rebrand, had been tempting. I told myself this was a chance to prove my worth, not just to some random client but to my sister. Maybe if she saw what I could really do, she'd stop dismissing my work as a hobby. Okay, I'd agreed. "But I need half up front and the other half when I deliver the final files." "Deal," Tori had said, relief flooding her voice. "I'll send you the client brief tonight." "Thank you, Maya. Really. You're saving my life here." The brief arrived in my inbox an hour later. Riverside Hotel was a small chain of 4 boutique properties scattered across the Pacific Northwest, in Seattle, Portland, Bend, and Cannon Beach. They catered to upscale travelers looking for intimate, locally rooted experiences. Their existing branding was dated, forgettable, doing nothing to convey the unique character of each location. The owner wanted something fresh but timeless, sophisticated but approachable, distinctive but cohesive across all 4 properties. I'd thrown myself into the project with an intensity one rarely allowed myself. For 3 weeks, I barely left my apartment. I researched boutique hotel trends, studied successful rebrands, analyzed color psychology and typography. I visited the Portland location, walking through the lobby, observing the architecture, the way light filtered through the windows, the textures of the furnishings. I took hundreds of photos, filling sketchbooks with ideas. The logo I created was elegant and minimalist, a stylized river running through abstract mountain peaks, suggesting both movement and stability. The color palette drew from Pacific Northwest landscapes, deep forest green, slate blue, warm taupe, with accents of burnished copper. I designed business cards, letterhead, website mockups, social media templates, even concepts for room key cards and welcome packets. Every element felt intentional, cohesive, telling the story of a hotel chain that honored its regional roots while offering modern luxury. I worked 16-hour days, surviving on instant ramen and endless coffee. My eyes burned from screen time. My back ached from hunching over my desk. But watching the brand come together, seeing how each piece connected to create something beautiful and functional, gave me a satisfaction I rarely felt. This was the kind of work I dreamed of doing, projects with scope and impact, not just small logos for local businesses. When I finally sent the complete package to Tori, I'd been proud. Genuinely, deeply proud. This was some of the best work I'd ever done. I'd included a note asking how she wanted me credited, suggesting we could list me as lead designer or creative consultant, something that would look good in my portfolio. Tori's response came 2 days later. The files are perfect. Exactly what we needed. The client is going to love this. I'm presenting tomorrow. I'll send your payment after the pitch. What about the credit? I'd asked in a follow-up email. How should I invoice you? Let me see how the pitch goes first, she'd replied. Don't want to count chickens before they hatch. The pitch had gone better than anyone expected. The client loved everything. They signed an expanded contract on the spot, agreeing to roll out the rebrand across all 4 properties plus 2 new locations they were planning. Tori's firm celebrated. Her creative director praised her vision and execution. Within a month, she'd been promoted to senior account manager with a significant raise. I'd waited for my payment. Days passed, then a week. When I finally called Tori, she'd been breezy, distracted. Oh right, your payment. Sorry, things have been crazy here. How about 3,000? We ended up going over budget on the pitch materials. We agreed on 5,000, I'd reminded her, trying to keep my voice steady. And what about the credit? I don't see my name anywhere in the project announcements. Maya, these things are complicated. It was a team effort. Lots of people contributed. You did the design work, sure, but I managed the client relationship, refined the concepts, presented everything. That's just as important. But I created everything from scratch. You didn't change anything I sent you. Her tone had shifted then, cooling. Look, do you want the money or not? I can send you 3,000 today, or we can keep arguing about who deserves credit for a collaborative project. I'd felt my stomach sink. The rent I'd been pushing off was now late. I had $70 in my checking account. Bills were piling up. I couldn't afford to fight her, not when I desperately needed whatever she was willing to pay. Fine, I'd said quietly. Send the 3,000. Great. And Maya? Let's keep the details of this arrangement between us. It's cleaner that way. Less confusing for everyone. The money had appeared in my account the next day. Not 5,000 as promised. Not even 3,000. $2,000, with a note saying she'd had to cover some unexpected expenses and would send the rest later. That rest never came. And I never pushed, too tired, too defeated, too aware of how little power I had. Over the following months, I watched Tori's career soar. The Riverside rebrand became her signature achievement. She included it prominently in her portfolio, featured it in interviews, used it as leverage to land bigger clients. Industry publications wrote about the successful transformation, always crediting Tori as the creative force behind it. My name was nowhere. Not in the press releases, not in the case studies, not even in fine print. I told myself to let it go. I'd been paid something, even if it was less than promised. Getting hung up on credit was petty, wasn't it? Tori was family. Helping her had been the right thing to do. Except it hadn't felt right. It had felt like being erased. Every time she mentioned the Riverside project at family dinners, talking about her creative process, her innovative approach, I sat there silent, my work attributed to her talent. My parents beamed with pride. Look what Tori accomplished. Look how creative she is. And I said nothing, swallowing the truth like poison. Marcus had been furious when I finally told him months later. We were at Grind and Brew, the same coffee shop where I just met Tori yesterday. He'd listened to the whole story, his expression darkening with each detail. She stole your work, he'd said bluntly. That's what this is. Theft. And she underpaid you on top of it. It's more complicated than that, I'd argued weakly. She was desperate. She needed help. I chose to help her. And she chose to take all the credit and build her career on your labor. That's not complicated, Maya. That's exploitation. But I'd made excuses for her then, just like I'd been making excuses my whole life. Tori was under pressure. The corporate world was cutthroat. These things happened. Collaboration was normal. Except it wasn't collaboration when one person did all the work and the other person took all the recognition. It wasn't collaboration when one person's career skyrocketed, while the other person kept struggling in obscurity. Now, lying in my apartment 5 years later, staring at shadows on the ceiling, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what she'd done. She hadn't just taken credit for one project. She'd stolen the foundation of her success. Every promotion, every accolade, every opportunity that followed Riverside could be traced back to work I'd created. Work she'd claimed as her own. Work she'd then used to mock my pathetic career. As if her accomplishments were proof of her superiority and my struggles were proof of my inadequacy. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Tori. Have you thought about it? Please, Maya. I need to know what you're going to tell Jonathan. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to ignore her, make her wait the way she'd made me wait for payment 5 years ago. But another part of me felt the old familiar pull, the instinct to smooth things over, to protect her from consequences, to be the good sister who didn't make waves. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on something neutral. I'm meeting with Jonathan Pierce on Monday. I'll hear what he has to say. Her reply came instantly. What does that mean? Are you going to tell him the truth? What is the truth, Tori? That you lied about creating the Riverside rebrand? That you built your career on my work? That you've spent 5 years accepting praise for something you didn't do? My phone rang. Tori calling. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. I turned it off. The weekend passed in a strange haze. I tried to work on a children's book illustration I'd been commissioned to do. A whimsical scene of forest animals having a picnic, but my concentration was shattered. Every time I picked up my stylus, I'd find myself staring at the blank screen, thinking about Riverside, about Jonathan Pierce, about what I was going to say. Marcus came over Saturday night with Thai food and a bottle of wine. He knew something major was happening without me having to explain. I told him everything, the whole story spilling out. Tori's panic, Jonathan's discovery. The meeting scheduled for Monday. What do you want to do? He asked when I finished. Not what's right or fair or justified. What do you actually want? I've been asking myself the same question for 2 days. Did I want revenge? Did I want to destroy Tori's career the way she diminished mine? Did I want public vindication, everyone knowing the truth about who really created the work that made her famous? I want her to acknowledge what she did, I said finally. I want her to stop treating my career like it's worthless when she knows exactly how valuable my work is. She built her life on it. Marcus refilled my wine glass. So tell Jonathan Pierce the truth. Let him decide what to do with it. It's not your job to protect her from the consequences of her own choices. But she's my sister. Family is complicated. Not that complicated. She stole from you, lied about it, and then spent years mocking you for not being as successful as her. That's not complicated. That's just cruel. Sunday, I tried to prepare for the meeting. I dug through old hard drives, finding the original files from the Riverside project. Every layer in Photoshop, every iteration in Illustrator, timestamps proving I'd created everything weeks before Tori's presentation. I found our email exchanges, her desperate requests, her promises of payment and credit. I compiled it all into a folder, evidence of the truth I'd kept buried for 5 years. My parents called Sunday evening. I almost didn't answer, but guilt and habit won out. Maya, honey, Tori told us there's been some kind of misunderstanding at her work, my mother said. Something about an old project. She sounds really upset. Do you know anything about this? I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar trap closing around me. Even now, even with proof and righteous anger on my side, they assumed I was somehow at fault. What did Tori tell you? Just that there's confusion about who worked on some campaign. You freelanced for her a few years ago, right? Maybe you could help clear things up? Tell her boss it was a team effort or something. The assumption that I should lie, should minimize, should protect Tori from consequences, was so automatic they didn't even realize they were asking me to do it. Of course Maya would help. Maya always helped. Maya never made things difficult. I'm meeting with her boss tomorrow, I said carefully. I'll tell him exactly what happened. Good, my father's voice came through. He must have been listening on speaker. I'm sure this is just a simple miscommunication. You girls have always worked well together. We really haven't, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. Dad, Tori and I have never worked well together. She's spent most of my life telling me my career is a joke. There was a pause. Well, she's just trying to motivate you, sweetie. She wants you to succeed. If treating me like a failure is her way of motivating me, it's not working. I have to go. I need to prepare for tomorrow. I hung up before they could respond, my heart pounding. I'd never pushed back like that before, never contradicted their narrative of family harmony. It felt terrifying and liberating at once. Monday morning arrived too quickly. I dressed carefully, choosing a professional outfit, black pants and a burgundy blouse, clothes I rarely wore in my normal freelance life. I wanted to look credible, like someone whose work deserved respect. The meeting was at Apex Strategies' downtown office, a sleek high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art in the lobby. I'd never been there before. This was Tori's world, all glass and steel and corporate sophistication. Jonathan Pierce's assistant met me on the 14th floor, leading me to a conference room. "Mr. Pierce will be with you shortly," she said. "Can I get you water, coffee?" "Water would be great, thank you." I sat at the long conference table, my folder of evidence in front of me, trying to calm my racing heart. Through the window I could see Mount Hood in the distance, snow-capped and serene. Tori's office was somewhere on this floor. Was she here? Did she know I'd arrived? The door opened and Jonathan Pierce walked in. He was tall, probably mid-40s, with graying hair and sharp blue eyes behind stylish glasses. He carried himself with the easy confidence of someone used to being in charge. "Miss Chen, thank you for coming in." He shook my hand firmly before sitting across from me. "I appreciate you making time on short notice." "Of course. I'm curious about why you wanted to meet." He opened a laptop, turning it so we could both see the screen. "Let me show you what I found." For the next 10 minutes, Jonathan walked me through his discovery. He'd been conducting an audit of major projects from the past 5 years, part of due diligence after the company had acquired new clients. When he examined the Riverside Hotel rebrand, something had seemed off. Tori's other work, while competent, had a different aesthetic sensibility. The Riverside project stood out as unusually sophisticated, with a design approach that didn't match her documented style. "So I dug deeper," he said. "I requested the original files from our archives. When I opened them in the native programs, I found metadata embedded in every layer. Your name, Maya Chen. Your computer information. Timestamps showing you created these files weeks before Tori presented them to the client." He turned to look at me directly. "Victoria Chen claimed full creative credit for a project you designed. That's fraud. It's also a violation of industry ethics standards, and potentially a breach of our company's code of conduct." I sat there, hearing someone in power finally say what I'd known for 5 years, but hadn't been able to articulate. It was fraud. It was wrong. It wasn't just office politics or creative collaboration. It was theft. "Can you tell me what happened?" Jonathan asked. "Your version of events." So I did. I told him everything. Tori's desperate phone call, her promises of payment and credit, the weeks I'd spent creating every element of the rebrand. The reduced payment, the missing credit, the years of watching her build a career on my work while telling me my own career was pathetic. Jonathan listened without interrupting, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, I opened my folder and slid it across the table. "This is everything. Original files, email exchanges, payment records. Proof that I created the Riverside rebrand." He spent several minutes examining the documents, his expression growing more serious. "This is clear-cut," he said finally. "Victoria engaged you for freelance work, failed to pay you the agreed-upon amount, failed to provide promise credit, and then misrepresented your work as her own for professional advancement. At Apex Strategies, we have zero tolerance for this kind of behavior." I felt my chest tighten. "What happens now?" "That partly depends on you, Miss Chen. You're the injured party here. You have grounds for legal action if you choose to pursue it. I also need to address this internally, but how I do that can vary based on your preferences." I stared at Jonathan Pierce, trying to process what he'd just said. Legal action. Internal consequences. The power to decide how this unfolded. For 5 years, I'd felt powerless in relation to Tori. Always the younger sister. Always the one whose work didn't matter. Always the one expected to accommodate and forgive. Now someone was telling me I had options, agency, control over what happened next. "What are my options?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, folding his hands on the table. "From a legal standpoint, you could pursue a claim for unpaid wages, intellectual property theft, potentially even defamation given that she's publicly claimed credit for your work. I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you that the documentation you've provided would support those claims." The metadata alone is damning evidence. And internally at Apex? His expression became more guarded. I have an obligation to address employee misconduct. Victoria misrepresented her qualifications and accomplishments when she interviewed here. The Riverside rebrand was a significant factor in our decision to hire her at a senior level. If that work wasn't hers, then she obtained her position under false pretenses. At minimum, that's grounds for disciplinary action. At maximum, termination. The word hung in the air between us. Termination. Tori fired, her career destroyed, her reputation ruined. Everything she built collapsing because the foundation was stolen. Part of me felt a fierce satisfaction at the thought. She deserved consequences. She'd wronged me, profited from it, and shown no remorse until she got caught. But another part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 29 years to prioritize family harmony, to smooth over conflicts, to protect Tori from her own mistakes, that part recoiled. I need time to think about this, I said. Of course. Jonathan closed his laptop. This is a significant decision. Take whatever time you need. But I do need to ask, has Victoria attempted to influence your statement in any way? Has she contacted you about this meeting? I hesitated, then decided honesty was the only path forward. She called me last week. She knows you found the metadata. She's scared. What did she say? She asked me not to tell you the truth. Or to downplay it, say it was a collaboration or misunderstanding. She's afraid of losing everything. Jonathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's witness tampering. It makes the situation worse, not better. I felt a stab of something, not quite guilt but close. By telling Jonathan about Tori's call, I just made her situation more precarious. Then again, why should I protect her? She'd never protected me. Mr. Pierce, can I ask you something? Of course. Why does this matter to you? I mean, you're her boss. The company got good work out of the Riverside project. The client was happy. Why go through the trouble of investigating this? He was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider his answer carefully. About 10 years ago, I was working at a different firm. We had a brilliant junior designer on staff, incredibly talented, but young and naive about office politics. A senior creative director took credit for several of her projects, won awards for them, got promoted based on work she'd done. By the time anyone realized what had happened, she'd left the industry entirely. I ran into her a few years ago. She's working retail management now, completely disconnected from design. When I asked why she left, she said the theft of her work had made her feel like nothing she created mattered. Someone had stolen not just her designs but her belief in herself. He met my eyes directly. I didn't speak up back then. I suspected what was happening but didn't want to get involved in office drama. I've regretted that silence for a decade. So when I found the metadata in Victoria's files, I decided I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. People who steal credit for others' work don't just damage one person. They damage the entire culture of creative fields. They make it harder for talented people to trust that merit matters. His words settled over me like a weight. This wasn't just about me and Tori. It was about a pattern, a systemic problem, the casual way powerful people took credit for the labor of those with less power. How many other designers had their work stolen? How many other Maya Chens were out there, silently swallowing injustice because challenging it felt too costly? Thank you for looking into this, I said quietly. Not many people would. It's my job to maintain ethical standards here. But more than that, it's the right thing to do. He stood, extending his hand again. Take a few days. Think about what you want. You can reach me directly at this number. He handed me a business card. Whatever you decide, I'll respect your choice. But I hope you'll choose to tell the truth. Not for revenge, but because you deserve to have your work recognized. I left the Apex Strategies building feeling unmoored. Like gravity had shifted and I wasn't sure which direction was up anymore. In my car I sat for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to sort through the chaos in my head. My phone had 17 missed calls. 12 from Tori, 3 from my mother, 2 from my father. There were texts too, increasingly frantic. From Tori at 9:47 a.m., right around when I would have been meeting with Jonathan. Please tell me you're not doing this. Please, Maya. Think about what this will do to me. At 10:15 I know I screwed up. I know I should have given you credit. But destroying my career won't change the past. It'll just make both of us miserable. At 10:43, you're really going to ruin your own sister? After everything our family has been through? How can you be so selfish? That last one made me laugh. A bitter sound in the empty car. Selfish. I was selfish for telling the truth about my own work. But she wasn't selfish for stealing it, for building a career on my labor, for spending years mocking the very talent she'd exploited. My mother's text was more manipulative. Maya honey, Tori is beside herself. She made a mistake years ago, but we all make mistakes. Family forgives. Please don't do anything you'll regret. Think about how this will affect all of us. Always the same message. Protect Tori. Accommodate Tori. Consider Tori's feelings, Tori's career, Tori's future. Never mind Maya's feelings, Maya's career, Maya's future. Those had never been the priority. I drove to Grind and Brew on autopilot. Marcus was there already, somehow knowing I'd need him. He'd taken a personal day from teaching, he told me, because he had a feeling this was going to be intense. I slid into the booth across from him and just started talking. Everything spilling out. The meeting with Jonathan, the evidence, the options for legal action. Tori's increasingly desperate messages. My parents trying to guilt me into silence. Marcus listened to all of it, sipping his coffee, his expression growing more troubled. When I finally stopped, exhausted from the verbal avalanche, he asked the same question Jonathan had. What do you want, Maya? I want it to be 5 years ago, I said. I want to go back and tell myself not to help her. To say no when she called asking for that favor. To never create those designs in the first place. But you can't. So what do you want now? I traced patterns in the condensation on my water glass. I want her to admit what she did. Publicly. I want my parents to see that my work isn't pathetic, that it's good enough that someone stole it and built a career on it. I want everyone who ever dismissed me to know the truth. Then tell Jonathan to do whatever he needs to do. Let him handle the company side, and you focus on getting your recognition. But she's my sister, I said, hating how weak it sounded. If I do this, if I let Jonathan fire her, our family will never forgive me. Marcus set his cup down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. Your family has never valued you, Maya. Your parents have spent your entire life comparing you unfavorably to Tori. She's spent your entire life belittling your accomplishments while secretly benefiting from your talent. What exactly are you afraid of losing? Because from where I'm sitting, you don't have their support now. You won't have it if you stay silent. At least if you tell the truth, you'll have your integrity. His words cut through the fog. He was right. I kept thinking of family as something precious I couldn't afford to lose, but what did I actually have with them? Obligatory dinners where I was ignored? Criticism disguised as concern? A relationship with a sister who saw me as useful when she needed something and contemptible the rest of the time? That wasn't family. That was just biology and habit. I spent that evening looking through my old portfolio, pieces I'd created over the years that I'd never shown my family because I knew they wouldn't care. A logo for a community garden that won a local design award. Illustrations for an indie author's fantasy series that developed a small but devoted following. A website redesign for a nonprofit that increased their donations by 40%. Steady, meaningful work that helped people and organizations I believed in. Then I pulled up Tori's professional website. Her portfolio section prominently featured the Riverside Hotel rebrand, with a lengthy case study describing her creative process, her innovative approach, her vision for merging modern luxury with regional authenticity. Every word was a lie. Or more accurately, every word described my creative process, my approach, my vision. She'd stolen not just the designs but the story of their creation, the intellectual journey that led to them. Further down her site I found press mentions. A profile in a marketing industry magazine where she discussed the Riverside project as her breakthrough moment. An interview on a podcast where she talked about the challenges of that rebrand and how she'd overcome them. A speaking engagement at a conference where she presented the project as a case study in effective design thinking. She'd built an entire professional narrative around work she didn't do, and that narrative had opened every subsequent door. The better jobs, the higher salaries, the industry recognition, all of it traced back to my designs. I opened a blank document and started writing. Not a legal statement or formal complaint, just thoughts trying to articulate for myself why this mattered so much. It wasn't really about the money, though being underpaid stung. It wasn't even entirely about the credit, though having my work attributed to someone else hurt. It was about being seen. For 29 years, I'd been invisible in my own family. My accomplishments didn't register. My struggles didn't matter. I was the supporting character in the story of Tori's success. And I'd enabled that dynamic by staying quiet, by not making waves, by accepting their assessment of my worth. The Riverside theft was just the most concrete example of a larger pattern. Tori taking what she needed from me, my labor, my ideas, my emotional support, and giving nothing back except contempt. My parents reinforcing the message that her needs superseded mine. Her feelings mattered more. Her career deserved protection while mine deserved dismissal. All of them benefiting from my tendency to accommodate, to forgive, to prioritize harmony over justice. But harmony built on injustice wasn't really harmony. It was just silence enforced by the threat of conflict. And I was tired of being silent. Tuesday morning I called Jonathan Pierce. When his assistant put me through, I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I want to tell the full truth about what happened with the Riverside project. I want it on record. And I want my work properly credited. I'm glad to hear that, Miss Chen. Can you come in this afternoon? I'd like to take a formal statement. I'll be there at 2. And Mr. Pierce? Whatever disciplinary action you think is appropriate for Victoria. I'm not going to stand in the way. She made her choices. She can live with the consequences. Understood. I'll see you at 2. After I hung up, I felt a strange calm. The decision was made. Whatever happened next, at least I'd spoken up. At least I'd stopped protecting someone who'd never protected me. My phone rang almost immediately. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. On the 4th call, I answered. Maya, what are you doing? She demanded, her voice high with panic. Tori just called me crying. She says you're trying to get her fired. How could you do this to your own sister? I'm telling the truth about work I created that she took credit for. That's all I'm doing. But you're going to ruin her life. Her career will be over. She'll lose her job, her reputation, everything she's worked for. Everything she's worked for, I repeated. Mom, she didn't work for the thing that made her career. I did. I spent 3 weeks creating that hotel rebrand. She presented it as her own, got promoted because of it, and built everything that followed on that foundation. Those are facts. It was years ago, Maya. Why are you bringing this up now? Can't you just let it go? Her boss found out. He investigated. He asked me to tell him what happened. I'm not going to lie to protect her from consequences she earned. My mother's voice took on the pleading tone she used when she really wanted something. But family protects each other. We don't air our problems to outsiders. We handle things privately. Can't you just talk to Tori, work something out between you two, and tell her boss it was a misunderstanding? There was the script again. Minimize, accommodate, protect Tori at all costs. I felt something crystallize inside me, hard and unmovable. No, I said simply. I'm not doing that anymore. What does that mean? It means I'm done protecting Tori from her own actions. I'm done making myself smaller so she can feel bigger. I'm done accepting your assessment that her career matters and mine doesn't. I created good work, Mom. Work good enough that it launched someone else's career. Maybe it's time you all recognize that. Maya Chen, you sound incredibly selfish right now. Think about your father and me. Think about what this will do to our family. The gossip, the embarrassment. People will talk. Let them talk. Maybe they should know the truth. If you go through with this, there will be consequences. Your father and I are not going to support you destroying your sister's life. You've never supported me anyway, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. You've spent my entire life telling me I'm not good enough, that my career is a joke, that I should be more like Tori. Well, guess what? Tori's success was built on my work. So maybe I am more like her than you realized. I'm just not willing to steal and lie to get ahead. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. I'd never spoken to my mother like that. Never pushed back so directly. Never named the dynamic so explicitly. It felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The formal statement I gave Jonathan that afternoon was detailed and documented. I walked him through the entire timeline, supported by emails, payment records, file metadata, everything. He had a colleague from HR join us. A woman named Patricia who took notes and asked clarifying questions. They were both professional, treating the situation seriously, treating me like someone whose account mattered. At the end, Patricia asked if I wanted to pursue legal action separately from Apex's internal investigation. I thought about it. A lawsuit would be public, messy, expensive. It would consume months or years of my life. And honestly, I didn't want money from Tori. I wanted something else entirely. I don't want to sue her, I said. But I do want a public acknowledgement. I want it on record somewhere, LinkedIn, industry publications, wherever, that I created the Riverside Hotel rebrand. I want my name attached to that work, properly credited. Jonathan nodded. I can facilitate that. As part of our internal resolution, I can require Victoria to issue a public statement correcting the record. It won't undo 5 years of misattribution, but it will establish the truth going forward. That's what I want. I paused, then added, and I want her to stop telling people my career is pathetic. Though I guess that part will solve itself once everyone knows she built her career on my work. Patricia's expression was sympathetic. I can't imagine how difficult this has been, carrying this knowledge while being dismissed by your own family. You're doing the right thing. I left the building feeling lighter than I had in years. The truth was out there now, documented officially, believed by people with power to act on it. Whatever happened next, I'd done what I could do. I'd stopped being complicit in my own erasure. That evening, Tori showed up at my apartment. I'd been half expecting it, so when the buzzer rang and I heard her voice through the intercom, I wasn't surprised. I was, however, completely uninterested in another confrontation. Maya, please. Let me come up. We need to talk. We've talked enough. There's nothing left to say. I'm not trying to fight with you. I just want to explain. You've had 5 years to explain. You chose not to. I pressed the button to end the call. She buzzed again immediately. Maya, please. I'm not leaving until you talk to me. I grabbed my keys and went downstairs, meeting her in the lobby of my building. She looked terrible, honestly. Her usual polish was gone, hair pulled into a messy ponytail, eyes red-rimmed from crying, wearing jeans and a wrinkled sweater instead of her typical corporate armor. For a split second, I felt bad for her. Then I remembered why we were here. Say what you need to say, I told her. But make it quick. Tori took a shaky breath, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. I know you hate me right now. I know I deserve it. But Maya, I need you to understand that I was desperate back then. I was about to lose my job. My entire career was on the line. I panicked. So you used me, I said flatly. You took my work, claimed it as your own, and then spent 5 years building your reputation on a lie. That's not panic, Tori. That's calculated fraud. I was going to tell people eventually, she insisted, her voice pleading. I was going to give you credit once things settled down. But then everything moved so fast. The promotion came through, and suddenly the Riverside project was this huge deal in my portfolio. By the time I realized how big it had become, it felt too late to correct it without destroying everything. It's been 5 years. When exactly were you planning to tell the truth? When you were retiring? When I was dead? She flinched at my tone. I know I should have been honest from the start. I know I should have insisted you be credited properly. But you have to understand the position I was in. In corporate marketing, you're only as good as your last success. If I'd admitted I didn't create that rebrand, I would have been finished. Not just fired, but blacklisted. No one would have hired me. And that made it okay to steal from me? To take credit for weeks of my labor? To underpay me and then spend years telling me my career was worthless while yours flourished because of my work? Tori's face crumpled. I never meant to hurt you. I thought you'd be happy to help your sister. I thought family was supposed to support each other. The audacity of that statement took my breath away. You thought I'd be happy to be erased? To watch you accept awards and promotions for work I created? To sit at family dinners while mom and dad praised your talent and dismissed mine? All while knowing that your biggest achievement was actually mine? I paid you, she shot back, some defensiveness creeping into her voice. It wasn't like you did it for free. You paid me $2,000 for work worth at least 10 times that. Work that generated hundreds of thousands in revenue for your firm. Work that got you promoted twice and eventually landed you at Apex. $2,000, Tori. That's an insult, not payment. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I know it wasn't enough. I know I should have paid you more. If I could go back and do it differently, I would. Would you though? Because from where I'm standing, you made calculated choices every step of the way. You chose to cut my payment. You chose not to credit me. You chose to lie about creating the work. You chose to build your entire professional narrative around something you didn't do. And then, when you were successful and secure, you chose to mock my career, to call it pathetic, to tell me I needed to grow up and get a real job. Those weren't mistakes, Tori. Those were choices. Tears were streaming down her face now. I was jealous, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I was jealous of your talent. You've always been the creative one, the artistic one. Everything comes so naturally to you. Design, illustration, all of it. Meanwhile, I've had to work twice as hard to be half as good. When I saw what you created for Riverside, I knew it was better than anything I could ever make. So I took it. I took it because I wanted people to look at me the way they look at you, like I had this special gift. People don't look at me like I have a special gift, I said bitterly. Our parents certainly don't. They think my career is a joke. You made sure of that with your constant criticism. Because seeing you struggle made me feel better about myself, she admitted, her voice breaking. If you were successful and happy, then what did that make me? The sister who needed to steal your work to get ahead? I couldn't face that. So I convinced myself and everyone else that your career was lesser, that you were wasting your potential, that you were the one who needed to change. It was easier than admitting the truth. Her confession hung in the air between us, raw and ugly. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? Acknowledgement of what she'd done. Admission of the jealousy and insecurity that had driven her cruelty. But hearing it didn't feel satisfying. It just felt sad. Sad that my sister had been so threatened by my talent that she'd needed to steal it, and then spend years diminishing me to protect her own ego. Thank you for being honest, I said quietly. But honesty now doesn't undo 5 years of lies. It doesn't give me back the credit I should have received. It doesn't repair the damage to my relationship with our parents, who think I'm a failure because you told them I was. It doesn't restore my belief that hard work and talent matter, which you destroyed when you showed me they could be stolen without consequence. Maya, please. If you let Jonathan fire me, I'll lose everything. My job, my reputation, my future in this industry. Derek already broke off our engagement. He doesn't want to be associated with someone accused of fraud. I'll be radioactive. No one will hire me. You should have thought about that before you committed fraud, I said. Actions have consequences, Tori. You taught me that lesson constantly when we were growing up. Whenever I made a mistake, you were the first one to point out how I'd brought the consequences on myself. Now it's your turn to live by that standard. So you're really going to destroy me? After everything we've been through, everything our family has been through, you're going to burn it all down for revenge. This isn't revenge. This is me finally standing up for myself. This is me saying that my work has value, that I deserve recognition for what I create, that I won't be erased anymore. If that destroys your career, that's on you. You built it on a lie. Lies don't last forever. Tori stared at me for a long moment, searching my face for something, weakness maybe, or doubt, some opening she could exploit. She didn't find it. Fine, she said, her voice turning cold. Do what you want. But don't expect our parents to forgive you for this. Don't expect me to forgive you. You're choosing to humiliate our entire family over something that happened years ago. That says everything about who you really are. It says I'm someone who won't let herself be used anymore, I replied. If that makes me the villain in your story, I can live with that. She turned and walked out without another word, the door slamming behind her. I stood in the lobby for a while, my heart pounding, processing what had just happened. She'd admitted everything, jealousy, theft, deliberate cruelty, all of it. And then when I wouldn't absolve her, when I wouldn't sacrifice myself again to protect her, she turned it around, making me the villain for refusing to enable her lies. It was so perfectly on brand for our relationship that I almost laughed. The following week moved slowly. Jonathan Pierce kept me updated on the internal investigation. Apex had strict ethics policies, and Tori's fraud violated multiple provisions. The company was preparing a formal disciplinary action. He asked again if I wanted to pursue independent legal action, but I declined. I didn't want to be tied to this situation for years through a lawsuit. I just wanted the truth acknowledged, and then I wanted to move forward with my life. Marcus helped me start planning that forward movement. We spent an evening at Grind and Brew, mapping out what came next. I'd been thinking about leaving Portland for a while, even before the Riverside situation exploded. The city held too many painful memories, too many associations with feeling inadequate and invisible. I needed a fresh start somewhere new. What about Austin? Marcus suggested. I have a cousin there who works in the arts community. She's always talking about how vibrant the creative scene is. Lots of independent galleries, tons of freelance opportunities, lower cost of living than Portland. You could actually afford a decent apartment. The idea appealed to me immediately. Austin was warm, creative, far enough from my family that I wouldn't constantly run into reminders of them. I started researching that night, looking at neighborhoods, apartment listings, creative communities. The more I learned, the more right it felt. This was exactly the kind of change I needed. Geographic distance to match the emotional distance I was creating. By Thursday, Jonathan called with an update. The investigation is complete. We're terminating Victoria's employment effective immediately. She'll receive 2 weeks severance, which is more generous than required given the circumstances, but we want to avoid a wrongful termination claim. She's also being required to issue a public statement correcting the record about the Riverside project. Our legal team has drafted it. She'll post it to LinkedIn and send it to relevant industry publications by end of day tomorrow. How is she taking it? I asked, not sure why I cared but unable to stop myself from asking. About as well as you'd expect. Her attorney is advising her not to fight it. The evidence is overwhelming. Fighting would only make things worse and potentially open her up to legal liability beyond just losing this job. She's agreed to the statement in exchange for a neutral reference for future employment. Part of me felt vindicated. Justice, finally, after 5 years of injustice. But another part felt hollow. This wasn't really about Tori getting punished. It was about me getting recognized, getting the credit I'd earned, getting acknowledgement that my work mattered. Tori's career imploding was just a side effect of the truth coming out. That evening my parents called. I almost didn't answer, but I knew the conversation had to happen eventually. My father's voice came through the line, tight with barely controlled anger. Your sister was fired today. I hope you're proud of yourself. I didn't get her fired, Dad. She got herself fired by committing fraud. I just stopped covering for her. You could have handled this privately, my mother interjected, her voice thick with tears. You could have worked it out as a family. Instead, you humiliated her publicly. You destroyed her career. How could you be so cruel? The projection was almost funny. I was cruel for telling the truth about my own work. But Tori wasn't cruel for stealing it, for lying about it, for mocking me for years while benefiting from my labor. The double standard was so deeply ingrained they couldn't even see it. Mom, Dad, I need you to understand something. For my entire life, you've treated me like I don't matter. Like my work, my career, my dreams are all inferior to Tori's. You've dismissed my accomplishments, minimized my struggles, and made it clear that I'm the disappointment. Tori built her entire career on work I created, work she stole from me, and you're angry at me for finally saying that out loud. Do you understand how backwards that is? We've always loved both of you equally, my father said. But his tone was defensive, automatic. Love isn't enough if it's not paired with respect. You don't respect what I do. You never have. You sided with Tori when she called my career pathetic, when she mocked me for not having a real job, when she treated me like a failure. You never once asked if maybe she was wrong. You never once considered that I might be good at what I do. And now that it's come out that her biggest success was actually my work, you're still siding with her. You're still making me the problem. There was a long silence on the other end. When my mother spoke again, her voice was cold in a way I'd rarely heard. If this is how you feel about us, maybe it's better if we take some space from each other. Your father and I need to focus on helping your sister through this crisis. We don't have the energy to deal with your resentment right now. That's fine, I said, my throat tight. I'm moving to Austin anyway. Fresh start in a new city. Maybe space is exactly what we all need. You're moving. When were you planning to tell us? I just decided. But honestly, what difference does it make? You've never been particularly interested in the details of my life. I don't see why that would change now. I hung up before they could respond, before they could make me feel guilty, before they could turn this into another example of my selfishness and Tori's victimhood. I was done with that narrative. Done letting them define my worth. Done measuring myself against Tori and inevitably falling short. Friday afternoon, Tori's statement went live on LinkedIn. I saw it because Marcus sent me a screenshot, knowing I'd want to see it but probably wouldn't be checking her profile myself. The statement was brief and carefully worded, clearly drafted by lawyers to minimize liability, while acknowledging the basic facts. Need to make a correction regarding the Riverside Hotel rebrand project from 5 years ago. While I managed the client relationship and presentation, the creative work including logo design, color palette, and all visual elements was created by my sister, Chen. I should have properly credited her at the time and in the years since. I apologize for this misrepresentation and want to ensure the record is accurate going forward. Maya is an exceptionally talented designer and deserves recognition for her work on this project. It was something. Not everything I deserved, not nearly adequate given 5 years of stolen credit, but it was acknowledgement. Within hours, the post had dozens of comments. Some were supportive of Tori, praising her for coming forward and correcting the mistake. Others were less kind, pointing out that 5 years was a long time to wait for such a correction, questioning what else in her portfolio might not be her own work. A few people tagged me saying congratulations on finally getting credit, asking to see more of my work. I didn't respond to any of it. I just updated my own portfolio website, adding the Riverside project properly credited, with a note explaining that I'd created it as a freelance commission, and was pleased to finally have it publicly acknowledged as my work. Then I closed my laptop and started packing for Austin. Marcus helped me load the moving truck 2 weeks later. I didn't own much, mostly just art supplies, books, and clothes. The furniture in my studio apartment had come with the place. Everything I cared about fit into a small truck, which felt both freeing and melancholy. 29 years in Portland, and this was all I had to show for it physically. But emotionally, spiritually, I was carrying less than I had in years. The weight of family expectations, of trying to earn approval that would never come, of swallowing injustice to keep peace, all of that was staying behind. You're doing the right thing, Marcus said as we finished loading the last boxes. Fresh start, new city, new opportunities. You're going to thrive there, Maya. I know it. Come visit, I told him, hugging him tightly. You're the only part of Portland I'll miss. Everything else can stay here. The drive to Austin took 3 days, long stretches of highway through Oregon, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. I'd never driven that far alone before. It gave me time to think, to process everything that had happened, to grieve the family I'd wanted but never really had. Somewhere in New Mexico, watching the desert landscape roll past, I found myself crying. Not from sadness exactly, but from release. I was letting go of the daughter who tried so hard to be enough, who bent herself into impossible shapes seeking approval. That daughter was staying behind in Portland. The woman driving to Austin was someone new. Someone who knew her worth, who wouldn't accept less than she deserved. Austin welcomed me with heat and humidity, and a kind of vibrant creative energy I'd never experienced before. I'd rented a small 1-bedroom apartment in East Austin. Nothing fancy but significantly nicer than my Portland studio. It had actual separate rooms, big windows, a patio where I could set up an outdoor workspace. The neighborhood was full of artists and musicians, coffee shops and galleries, the kind of community that valued creativity for its own sake. I spent the first week just settling in, unpacking boxes, getting my workspace set up, exploring the area. Then I started reaching out to local businesses, introducing myself as a freelance designer newly relocated from Portland. My portfolio, now properly including the Riverside project, opened doors. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 new clients, a bookstore needing a logo refresh, a coffee roaster wanting packaging design, and a small tech startup looking for brand identity work. The pace of work in Austin was different from Portland. People moved faster, decided quicker, seemed more willing to take chances on new talent. I found myself busier than I'd been in years, challenged in ways that felt exciting rather than overwhelming. And for the first time, I was getting paid what my work was actually worth. No more undercharging because I was desperate for any project. No more accepting lowball offers because I didn't think I could do better. I knew my value now, and I insisted other people recognize it too. 2 months after arriving in Austin, I was having coffee at a local place called Epoch when an older woman approached my table. I'd been working on sketches for the bookstore logo, my iPad and sketchbook spread out, completely absorbed in the work. "Excuse me," she said, her voice warm. "I couldn't help but notice your designs. They're lovely. May I ask what you're working on? I explained the bookstore project, and she listened intently, asking smart questions about my approach, my inspiration. She introduced herself as Diane Foster, owner of a contemporary art gallery downtown. I've been looking for a designer to create materials for my upcoming exhibition series, she said. Would you be interested in discussing a potential collaboration? That conversation led to one of the most significant professional relationships of my life. Diane became not just a client but a mentor, someone who understood the creative process, who valued art and design not just for their commercial applications, but for their intrinsic worth. She introduced me to other gallery owners, artists, creative professionals throughout Austin. My network expanded rapidly, and with it, my opportunities. By the 6-month mark, I was making more money than I'd ever made freelancing. Not corporate executive money, not Tori's 6-figure salary, but enough to live comfortably, to save, to invest in better equipment and professional development. More importantly, I was happy. The work fulfilled me in ways it hadn't before, probably because I was finally doing it on my own terms, not constantly trying to prove something to people who would never be satisfied. I didn't hear from my parents at all during those months. No calls, no texts, no emails. The silence hurt less than I expected. Marcus updated me occasionally on Portland gossip. Tori had moved back in with our parents temporarily while she looked for work. Her job search was apparently difficult, the fraud scandal having spread through industry networks. Several companies had rescinded interview offers after Googling her name and finding articles about the Riverside situation. She'd eventually taken a significant step down, a junior marketing coordinator position at a small firm, making barely half what she'd earned at Apex. I should have felt more triumphant about that. Instead, I mostly felt tired. This had never been about destroying Tori. It had been about refusing to be destroyed myself. Her downfall was her own doing, consequences of choices she made. I just stopped absorbing those consequences on her behalf. Then, 8 months after I moved to Austin, my mother called. I stared at her name on my phone screen for a long moment before answering. Hello, Mom. Maya, her voice was tentative, uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. How are you? I'm well. Living in Austin. Working. Doing fine. That's good. I'm glad. There was a long pause. Your father and I have been talking about everything that happened. We think maybe we should talk, the three of us. Would you be willing to have that conversation? What kind of conversation? I asked carefully. One where you tell me I was wrong to expose Tori's fraud? Where you ask me to apologize for not protecting her? Because I'm not interested in that conversation. No, she said quickly. Not that. A conversation where we listen. Where we try to understand your perspective. We've been doing some reading, actually. About family dynamics, about scapegoating, about, she paused, clearly uncomfortable, about how parents sometimes favor one child without realizing it. I felt something loosen in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the possibility of it someday. What prompted this reading? Your sister has been in therapy. Her therapist suggested family therapy for all of us. Tori refused, but the things the therapist said to her about patterns in our family, about how we treated you differently, it made your father and I think. Really think. And we realized we owe you an apology, Maya. A real one. Not for exposing what Tori did, but for all the years before that. For not valuing your work. For not seeing your talent. For making you feel like you weren't enough. Tears burned in my eyes. This was what I'd wanted my entire life. Acknowledgement. Validation. An admission that the problem wasn't me, that I hadn't been deficient or disappointing, that the way they treated me was wrong. Having it now, after I'd already done the work of healing myself, accepting myself, building a life that didn't require their approval, it felt both profound and anticlimactic. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. I do. But I need you to understand that an apology doesn't erase 29 years of damage. It doesn't automatically repair our relationship. If you want to rebuild something with me, it's going to take time. And it's going to require you to actually see me, to value what I do, to treat me as an equal to Tori instead of as her inferior. We want to try, my mother said. We know we can't fix everything immediately, but we'd like to try. If you're willing. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect myself from potential disappointment, to maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. But another part of me, smaller but persistent, still wanted a relationship with my parents. Not the relationship we'd had, but something new, built on honesty and mutual respect instead of old patterns and unspoken hierarchies. "Okay," I said. "We can talk. But I'm not moving back to Portland. My life is here now. If you want to know me, you'll have to actually make an effort to know me. Not the daughter you wanted me to be, but the person I actually am." "I understand," my mother said. "We'll work with that. Thank you for giving us a chance, Maya. We don't deserve it, but thank you." After we hung up, I sat on my patio watching the Austin sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I didn't know if my parents would follow through, if they were capable of the kind of change they were promising. Maybe this was just a temporary burst of guilt that would fade once Tori's situation stabilized. Maybe they'd slip back into old patterns, favoring her, dismissing me, expecting me to accommodate and forgive without reciprocal effort. But maybe, just maybe, they were genuinely willing to do the work. Either way, I was going to be okay. I'd built a life that didn't depend on their approval. I had work I was proud of, clients who valued me, a mentor who believed in my potential, a best friend who'd stood by me through everything. I had proof, concrete and undeniable, that I was talented, that my work mattered, that I was enough exactly as I was. The Riverside Hotel rebrand still existed out there in the world, properly credited to me now. Occasionally I'd get emails from industry people who'd seen Tori's correction, asking about my availability for projects, complimenting my design sensibility. Each one felt like a small vindication, evidence that telling the truth had been the right choice, even when it was the hard choice. Tori and I hadn't spoken since that confrontation in my apartment lobby. I didn't know if we ever would again. Part of me mourned the sister relationship I'd always wanted, the one where we supported each other, celebrated each other's successes, could be vulnerable and honest without cruelty. But that relationship had never existed. It had always been a fantasy, a hope I'd clung to despite mountains of evidence that Tori saw me as competition rather than family. Maybe someday we'd find a way to rebuild something, maybe years from now after she'd done her own healing work, after we'd both grown enough to meet each other as equals rather than as the roles our family had assigned us. Or maybe not. Maybe some relationships were too damaged to salvage, too poisoned by years of hurt to ever become healthy. I was learning to be okay with that uncertainty, learning to accept that I couldn't control whether other people chose to grow, chose to change, chose to treat me with the respect I deserved. I could only control my own choices. And I chose myself. I chose honesty over harmony. I chose visibility over invisibility. I chose to insist on recognition for my work, even when that insistence made me uncomfortable, even when it disrupted family systems that had been in place for decades. Those choices had cost me things: my relationship with Tori, at least temporarily, my easy access to my parents, my place in family gatherings and traditions. But they'd also given me things that mattered more. Self-respect, integrity, the ability to look at myself in the mirror and know I hadn't betrayed my own worth for the comfort of others. The lesson I learned through all of this wasn't really about Tori or my parents or career success. It was about value, how we determine it, who gets to define it, what we're willing to sacrifice to protect it. For most of my life, I'd let other people determine my value. I'd accepted their assessment that I was less than, that my work was inferior, that my dreams were impractical. I'd internalized their voices until they became my own inner critic, constantly questioning whether I was good enough, talented enough, successful enough. But value isn't determined by external validation. It's not measured in salary or prestige or family approval. It's inherent in the work itself, in the care and skill and creativity poured into creation. The Riverside rebrand had always been valuable. It had always been good work. That didn't change whether Tori's name was on it or mine. What changed was whether I insisted on being recognized for what I'd created, whether I allowed myself to be erased, whether I accepted invisibility as the price of keeping peace. I'd spent 29 years trying to earn a place in my family by being accommodating, helpful, self-sacrificing. By pouring my talent into projects that benefited others while receiving nothing in return except criticism. That strategy hadn't worked. It had never worked. They hadn't loved me more for my accommodation. They'd just taken advantage of it. The path forward wasn't through more sacrifice, more silence, more acceptance of scraps. It was through boundaries, through honesty, through insisting on reciprocity, through recognizing that people who truly valued me wouldn't ask me to diminish myself to make them comfortable. As the sun finished setting and the Austin evening settled in warm and alive with the sounds of a city that embraced creativity, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the false peace of avoiding conflict, but the real peace that comes from alignment between your values and your actions. I'd told the truth. I'd stood up for myself. I'd chosen my own well-being over family expectations. And the world hadn't ended. In fact, my world had expanded, opened up, became richer and more authentic than it had ever been when I was trying to be someone I wasn't. The secret was out now. My work was credited. Tori's career had imploded under the weight of her own lies. My parents were attempting, however imperfectly, to acknowledge their mistakes. And I was here in Austin, building a life that reflected my actual values, surrounded by people who appreciated my work, doing what I loved without apology. This was the twist I'd never seen coming. The story wasn't about my sister's betrayal or my family's favoritism, or even about getting recognition for stolen work. It was about discovering that I didn't need them to see my worth for it to be real. It was about learning that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of people who refuse to value you, even when those people are family. It was about choosing authenticity over acceptance, even when authenticity costs you everything you thought you wanted. I'd walked away from Portland thinking I was leaving behind a family who didn't appreciate me. What I'd actually left behind was a version of myself who believed she needed their appreciation to be whole. The woman I was becoming in Austin knew better. She knew her value was inherent, not assigned. She knew her work mattered whether or not anyone acknowledged it. She knew she deserved respect, recognition, and reciprocity in all her relationships. And she was finally done accepting anything less. A year had passed since I'd left Portland, and Austin had become home in ways I hadn't anticipated. The city wrapped around me like a warm embrace, its creative energy feeding something in my soul that had been starving for decades. I'd found my rhythm here, a balance between work and life that had always eluded me when I was trying to prove myself to people who would never be satisfied. My client roster had grown substantially. Diane Foster's gallery had led to connections with 3 other galleries in the area, and I'd become their go-to designer for exhibition materials, catalogs, promotional campaigns. The work was creatively fulfilling and financially stable, a combination I'd never quite achieved in Portland. I was making close to $70,000 a year now, not corporate executive money but more than enough to live comfortably, save for the future, and occasionally splurge on things that brought me joy like the professional drawing tablet I'd been eyeing for months or weekend trips to explore Texas Hill Country. Beyond the financial stability, I'd found something more valuable. A community that saw me. Diane had introduced me to a collective of women artists and designers who met monthly at various studios and galleries around Austin. These women ranged from their late 20s to their 60s, working in everything from painting to sculpture to digital art to textile design. They understood the challenges of creative work, the vulnerability of putting your vision into the world, the frustration of having your labor undervalued or dismissed. At one of these gatherings, held at a ceramic studio in South Austin, I'd finally told the full story of what happened with Tori. We were sitting in a circle on mismatched chairs and cushions, drinking wine from paper cups, sharing our experiences navigating creative industries. When it was my turn to speak, something in the supportive atmosphere made me open up completely. I told them about creating the Riverside rebrand, about Tori taking credit, about 5 years of watching her build a career on my work while calling my career pathetic. I told them about Jonathan Pierce discovering the truth, about Tori's firing, about the fractured relationship with my family. The response was immediate and fierce. Several women had similar stories: work stolen by bosses or colleagues, credit taken by men for ideas they'd pitched, years of labor dismissed as less valuable because it came from women. One sculptor named Patricia talked about a gallery owner who'd replicated her techniques and sold the resulting pieces as his own original work. A graphic designer named Keisha described a former employer who'd used her portfolio to win clients then fired her before the project started so he could pocket her fees. "You did the right thing," Patricia said, her voice firm. "Staying silent doesn't protect you. It just enables them to keep stealing from others. I know it cost you, but you stopped your sister from building an entire career on fraud. That matters." Her words settled something in me that I hadn't realized was still unsettled. I'd been carrying guilt about Tori's downfall, questioning whether I'd been too harsh, whether I should have found a way to resolve things privately. But Patricia was right. If I'd stayed silent, Tori would have continued claiming credit for work she didn't do, possibly stealing from other designers, definitely perpetuating a system where those with power could exploit those without it. My honesty had consequences beyond just our family drama. It had ethical implications for the entire industry. The creative collective became an anchor for me in Austin, a chosen family that understood my work in ways my biological family never had. These women celebrated my successes without resentment, offered constructive feedback without cruelty, showed up for my gallery exhibitions and cheered for my new contracts. They saw my talent and reflected it back to me, helping me internalize the confidence I'd been building since leaving Portland. My relationship with my parents remained complicated and careful. True to her word, my mother had been trying. She called every few weeks, asking about my projects, actually listening when I described them, offering encouragement instead of criticism. My father was slower to change, his conversation still somewhat stilted, but he was making an effort. They'd visited Austin once, staying at a hotel downtown and taking me to dinner at a nice restaurant overlooking the river. During that dinner, my mother had said something that stuck with me. I've been thinking a lot about how we raised you and Tori differently. I told myself it was just responding to your individual personalities, but I see now it was more than that. We pushed you to be practical because we were afraid for you, afraid that choosing art would mean struggling. But we didn't push Tori the same way. We just assumed she'd be successful at whatever she chose. That wasn't fair to you, Maya. It sent a message that we didn't believe in you the same way we believed in her. It was the closest my mother had come to naming the favoritism directly, and I appreciated the honesty. I don't know if we can fully repair what was broken, I told her. But I'm willing to keep trying if you are. The key is consistency. I need to see that this isn't just temporary guilt, that you're genuinely committed to seeing me differently. We are, my father had said, speaking up unexpectedly. We are committed. We've missed too much of your life already, made too many mistakes. We don't want to miss any more. Their efforts, however imperfect, meant something. I wasn't ready to fully trust them again, might never be, but I could acknowledge their attempts at growth. The relationship would never be what it had been. The dynamic of dutiful, disappointing daughter trying to earn approval from critical parents. But maybe it could become something healthier. Adults relating to each other with honesty and respect rather than playing out old scripts. Tori remained the one completely severed connection. According to Marcus, who still lived in Portland and occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances, she'd stabilized somewhat. The junior coordinator position had lasted about 6 months before she'd found something slightly better, an account manager role at a mid-sized firm. She was slowly rebuilding her career, but the fraud scandal had permanently limited her options. The corporate marketing director trajectory she'd been on was essentially closed to her now. She'd be stuck in mid-level positions for the foreseeable future, never quite able to escape the shadow of what she'd done. Part of me felt sad about that. Not guilty exactly because her consequences were her own doing, but sad that things had turned out this way. We'd never been close, but she was still my sister. I'd never wanted to destroy her. I just wanted her to stop destroying me. The fact that those two things had turned out to be incompatible said everything about the toxicity of our relationship. Marcus had asked me once during one of our regular video calls if I would ever consider reconciling with Tori. I'd thought about it carefully before answering. I don't know. Maybe someday if she does the work. If she genuinely understands what she did and why it was wrong, not just the theft but the years of cruelty that followed. If she can acknowledge her jealousy and her need to diminish me to feel better about herself. If she can apologize without making excuses or expecting immediate forgiveness. Then maybe we could have some kind of relationship. But I'm not holding my breath. And I'm not waiting for it. My life is full without her in it. That was the truth. My life in Austin was genuinely full. Rich with work I loved, friendships that nourished me, creative challenges that pushed me to grow. I'd started taking on more ambitious projects, including a children's book series that I was both writing and illustrating. The first book was about a young girl who discovers she can paint doorways to other worlds. It was fantastical and whimsical, but also deeply personal, about a child who feels invisible in her own family finding a place where she's seen and valued. Diane had agreed to host a launch event at her gallery when the book was published. The thought of it, my words and illustrations celebrated in a physical space, people gathering to see work I'd created from imagination, it filled me with a joy I'd rarely allowed myself to feel. For so long, I'd been afraid to fully claim my identity as an artist, as a creative professional, because my family's dismissal had made me doubt whether I deserved those labels. But I was done doubting. I was an artist, a designer, an illustrator, a storyteller. Those weren't hobbies or side hustles. They were who I was, and they were enough. The book's publication date was set for October, just over a year since I'd left Portland. The timing felt symbolic, a full cycle of seasons in my new life. Marcus flew down for the launch party, taking a long weekend from teaching. Walking into Diane's gallery that evening and seeing my artwork displayed on the walls, seeing people I'd come to care about gathered to celebrate me, I felt something click into place. This was what success looked like for me. Not corner offices or six-figure salaries, but work that mattered to me, community that supported me, the freedom to create without constantly defending my choices. During the event, I gave a short speech thanking everyone who'd helped me get to this point. I talked about the journey from Portland to Austin, about learning to value my own work, even when others didn't, about the importance of finding people who see you clearly. I didn't mention Tori by name, but I talked about the experience of having work stolen, of fighting to reclaim it, of discovering that the act of standing up for myself had been more valuable than any external recognition could be. After my speech, a young woman approached me, probably in her early 20s, clutching a copy of my book. She introduced herself as a design student at the University of Texas, said she'd been following my work online since the Riverside scandal broke. "I just wanted to tell you that your story meant a lot to me," she said, her voice earnest. "I'm the first person in my family going into creative work, and they think it's a waste of time. They want me to do something practical, something that makes real money. But seeing you build a successful career doing what you love, even after people tried to stop you, it gives me hope that I can do it too." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been so focused on my own healing, my own journey, that I hadn't fully considered how my story might resonate with others. But of course it would. How many young artists were out there fighting the same battles I'd fought, trying to convince skeptical families that creative work had value, struggling against systems that devalued their labor, tempted to give up when the obstacles felt insurmountable. "Keep going," I told her. "It won't be easy, and there will be days when you question everything. But if this is what you're meant to do, if creating feeds your soul, then it's worth fighting for. Find your people, the ones who understand and support you. Set boundaries with the ones who don't. And never let anyone convince you that your work doesn't matter. It does. You do." She thanked me, eyes bright with tears, and I watched her walk away thinking about all the versions of myself I'd been. The 12-year-old with the watercolor painting that nobody noticed. The college student choosing graphic design despite family disapproval. The struggling freelancer pouring her heart into the Riverside rebrand. The woman sitting in that Apex conference room deciding whether to tell the truth. Each version had been necessary. Each struggle had taught me something essential about my own strength. The party continued for hours, people coming and going, examining my artwork, buying copies of the book, asking about my process. Diane pulled me aside at one point, her face glowing with pride. "You know, when I first met you at that coffee shop, I saw talent, but I also saw doubt. You were good, but you didn't quite believe you were good. That's changed. You carry yourself differently now. You know your worth." She was right. I did know my worth now. Not in an arrogant way, but in a grounded, certain way. I knew what my work was worth financially, and I charged accordingly. I knew what my work was worth creatively, and I didn't accept projects that would compromise my vision. I knew what I was worth as a person, and I didn't accept relationships that required me to minimize myself. That knowledge, hard-won through pain and conflict and ultimately choosing myself, it was the foundation everything else was built on. As the evening wound down and the last guests filtered out, I helped Diane clean up the gallery. Marcus was staying with me for the weekend, and we walked back to my apartment through the warm Austin night. The city alive with music and laughter and light. "You did it," he said simply. "You really did it. Built a whole new life. Became successful on your own terms. I'm proud of you, Maya." "I'm proud of me too," I said, and realized I meant it completely. No qualifications, no lingering doubts, just genuine pride in what I'd accomplished. Not just the book or the career or the financial stability, though those mattered. But the internal work, the emotional growth, the willingness to burn down a dysfunctional family system, rather than keep sacrificing myself to maintain it. That was the real achievement. Later that night, lying in bed scrolling through photos from the event, I came across a message request on Instagram. It was from Tori. The preview showed just the first line. "Maya, I saw the photos from your book launch." I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the button to open the full message. Part of me was curious about what she had to say. Part of me didn't want to let her back in, even briefly, into the peace I'd cultivated. Finally, I opened it. The full message read, "Maya, I saw the photos from your book launch. It looks like you're doing really well in Austin. I'm happy for you, genuinely. I know I don't have the right to reach out after everything, and you don't owe me a response. But I've been in therapy for almost a year now, working through a lot of things. My therapist has helped me understand how my jealousy and insecurity drove me to hurt you, how I stole from you not just once but repeatedly by taking credit for your work, and then spending years diminishing your career to make myself feel superior. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. I know saying sorry can't fix what I broke, but I am sorry. Sorry for stealing your work. Sorry for the years of cruelty. Sorry for not standing up for you with mom and dad when they dismissed your talent. You deserved better from me, from all of us. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking to be part of your life if you don't want that. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were always the talented one, the brave one, the one actually living with integrity. I built my success on lies and exploitation. You built yours on genuine skill and courage. That's the difference between us, and I'm finally able to admit it. I'm glad you're thriving. You deserve every good thing coming your way. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you don't, I understand. Either way, congratulations on the book. I know it's going to be beautiful." I read the message 3 times, analyzing every word for deflection or manipulation, for the subtle ways she might be trying to excuse her behavior or center her own pain. But I didn't find any of that. The apology seemed genuine, unqualified, taking full responsibility without making excuses. The acknowledgement of my talent and courage felt sincere. The offer to talk without pressure or expectation seemed respectful of my boundaries. It was, in short, everything I'd wanted to hear from her for years. And having it now, when I no longer needed it, when I'd already done the work of healing without her participation, it felt both meaningful and insufficient. Meaningful because it confirmed what I'd always known, that she'd wronged me deliberately, that my hurt was justified, that I deserved better. Insufficient because words, however sincere, couldn't give me back the years I'd spent doubting myself, couldn't erase the damage to my relationship with my parents, couldn't restore the sister relationship we'd never actually had. I didn't respond that night. Maybe I would eventually, maybe I wouldn't. The beauty of having built a life that didn't depend on her or anyone else's validation was that I could take my time deciding. I could sit with her apology, feel whatever I felt about it, and choose my response from a place of strength rather than desperation. The scared young woman who would have immediately forgiven anything just to restore family harmony, she was gone. The woman I'd become could acknowledge an apology without immediately granting absolution, could appreciate someone's growth without feeling obligated to welcome them back into her life. The next morning over coffee, I told Marcus about Tori's message. He read it carefully, then handed my phone back. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to believe she's really changed, that she's done the work to understand what she did and why it was wrong. Part of me thinks it doesn't matter whether she's changed or not. That chapter of my life is closed. I don't need her remorse or her acknowledgement anymore. I've moved on." "You have," Marcus agreed. "So maybe the question isn't whether to forgive her or let her back in. Maybe it's just whether having some kind of limited contact would add anything positive to your life, or whether it would just open old wounds." He was right. This wasn't about whether Tori deserved forgiveness. It was about whether a relationship with her, even a careful boundaried one, would enrich my life or detract from it. I didn't have an answer to that yet, and I was learning to be okay with uncertainty, with not rushing to resolution, with letting things unfold in their own time. What I did know, sitting in my Austin apartment with my best friend, sunlight streaming through windows, my book on the coffee table, and a career I loved waiting for me Monday morning. What I knew was that I'd made it. Not just survived but thrived. I'd walked away from people who didn't value me and built a community of people who did. I'd stopped accepting scraps and started demanding what I deserved. I'd transformed pain into power, betrayal into boundaries, invisibility into undeniable presence. The secret that Tori's boss exposed hadn't just been about one stolen project. It had exposed an entire family system built on devaluing my work, my worth, my very existence. And in the exposure, in the painful unraveling that followed, I'd found something I'd been searching for my entire life: myself. Not the version my parents wanted, not the role my sister needed me to play, but the actual person I was. Creative, talented, strong, worthy of respect and recognition and love. That person had been there all along, buried under years of conditioning and criticism and compromise. But she'd survived, and now she was thriving, and nothing anyone had done to try to diminish her had worked in the end. Standing on my patio later that afternoon, looking out at the Austin skyline, I thought about that young design student from the launch party. I hoped she made it. Hoped she found the courage to pursue her creative dreams despite her family's doubts. I hoped she never had to experience what I experienced: work being stolen, years of dismissal, the pain of family betrayal. But if she did face those challenges, I hoped she'd remember what I told her. Keep going, find your people. Never let anyone convince you that your work doesn't matter. Because it does matter. All of it matters. The art we create, the stories we tell, the beauty we bring into the world. It matters whether anyone acknowledges it or not. It matters whether it makes us rich or just makes us happy. It matters because we matter. Because our unique vision and voice and talent deserve to exist and be celebrated. That was the lesson I'd learned in the hardest possible way. That was the truth I'd carry forward into whatever came next. My sister had mocked my pathetic career, and then her boss had exposed our secret. But the real secret, the one that mattered most, was this. I'd never been pathetic. I'd been powerful all along, talented and capable and worthy. I just needed to believe it myself, to stop seeking validation from people who would never give it, to build a life that reflected my own values rather than their expectations. And now I had that life. Hard won, authentic, fully mine. Whatever happened with Tori, whatever happened with my parents, whatever challenges lay ahead, I had this foundation. I had myself whole and healed and finally free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.